Commissioner Rettig, thank you for agreeing to testify on 2020 tax filing season and the IRS's handling of challenges that pose because of the pandemic. 2020 filing season got off to its typical start at the end of January. However, since then, this filing season has been anything but typical as a result of the national health emergency stemming from the ongoing pandemic. Almost all regular tax filing and tax payment deadlines have been extended. This includes the individual and corporate income tax filings and payment deadlines, which were pushed back from the normal April 15th to July 15th, and there's some rumors they might be extended again. I don't know. I've heard that at least once. Despite these extended deadlines, the tax filing season continued, with many taxpayers still filing their taxes as usual to get their tax refund. At the same time, consistent with government shutdown orders and CDC guidance, the IRS limited much of its work to essential services, closed a number of facilities, and instituted telework policies where practical. This left the IRS short-staffed during the busiest time of the year. Understandably, that meant taxpayers experienced longer wait times to get their tax questions answered. It meant more calls than usual went unanswered, and mail, including paper returns, went unprocessed. Over the last couple of weeks, the IRS has begun to reopen facilities and start back to normal operations. So, Commissioner, I will be interested to learn more from you on how the reopening is proceeding and what actions are being taken to clear the backlog of taxpayer correspondence. While the IRS has worked to keep up with the filing season duties, it also has been tasked with implementing a number of tax measures enacted by Congress to provide relief for individuals and businesses. IRS and Treasury have worked nonstop to put out necessary guidance to taxpayers, navigate important provisions designed to help families make ends meet, and provide businesses with needed liquidity to keep the lights on and the employees on the payroll. But even more daunting was the implementation of the rebates for individuals, often referred to as economic impact payments. IRS and Treasury worked in unprecedented speed to get the payments out the door and to hand the individuals and families forced to stay home due to the pandemic. Over about a 2-month span, nearly 160 million stimulus payments totaling almost $267 billion were delivered by direct deposit, check, or prepaid debit card. The IRS took steps to get payments to as many eligible individuals as possible. This included working with the Social Security Administration, Department of Veterans Affairs, to get payments for seniors, veterans, and individuals receiving certain federal benefits, those same people having no need to file a tax return. For others who typically do not file a tax return, the IRS established an online tool to register for the payments. Over 6 million individuals and families took advantage of that tool. Commissioner Rettig, you ought to be thanked, and I do thank you and your staff for working around the clock to get this much needed assistance in the hands of taxpayers during difficult times that was no fault of their own, because for the first time in 244 years, our government took the step of actually shutting down the economy and a lot of people being unemployed, and that help badly needed. When you consider all this, I would say the IRS performed exceptionally well under the circumstances. Of course, when you're tasked with processing 160 million payments in expedited fashion, there are bound to be some hiccups. But there will always be Monday morning quarterbacks eager to criticize, even though we all know they couldn't have done it any better. I'm interested in getting your perspective on how the process has worked, what the IRS has learned, and what improvements could be made should this or a future Congress once again task the IRS with administering stimulus payments. Beyond the current filing season, the challenges posed by the pandemic, the IRS has been working to implement the Taxpayers First Act, which was enacted last year to modernize the IRS and beef up taxpayer protections. The Taxpayers First Act calls for the IRS to institute comprehensive customer service strategy, modernize its organization structure, and implement an information technology strategy. I look forward to hearing how the IRS has proceeded with those reforms. We thank you once again. Now I turn to Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman and colleagues, on behalf of the chairman and I do have some sad news to begin this morning's hearing with. Ed Kleinbard, who was the chief of staff for the Joint Committee on Taxation, has passed away, and he was a truly extraordinary person. He accomplished the rare trifecta of making his mark as a respected expert in tax law, in business, in government, and in the academic world. He was always professional. I see my friend Senator Thune here. We all remember him. Always professional, always fair to both sides. And he became a personal friend of mine, a man of exceptional warmth and good humor. I always thought of him as a mensch. This was a man with exceptional character, and I just wanted to make those remarks, and the chairman said I should express our sorrow on behalf of both of us today for the passing of Ed Kleinbard. Now, as the chairman noted, we meet for our annual oversight hearing. This year, of course, it is intertwined with the COVID-19 response, as the chairman mentioned. I want to start with COVID-19 because I think we are all seeing spikes now across the country, tens of thousands of newly identified cases every day, ICU beds and hotspots running dangerously low. The president said out in the open that he wanted less testing, and he's reportedly gone weeks without speaking to our top public health officials. I think that's particularly unfortunate because I think what happens is it causes Americans to say that some of their elected leaders have just given up. And in my view, that just defies common sense because it's an absolute certainty. Jobs in the economy can't come to full strength as long as the pandemic continues with these kinds of spikes in so many communities so hard hit. This community is going to have to do more. We are going to be in the center of key economic discussions in the next few weeks. I strongly feel, as my colleagues all here know, that a top priority has got to be to extend supercharged unemployment benefits for as long as it takes to get the economy back to normal. And I see my friend Senator Thune here and colleagues know that what this means is you've got to have these benefits so that people can pay their rent and their groceries. And then, of course, as unemployment goes down, and the senator from South Dakota calls it, tapering off, of course, when unemployment goes down, then you're in a different situation. But we can't leave people August 1st not being able to pay the rent or afford groceries because they're going to just, again, be in a position where we'll probably have a tsunami of evictions and people who will just be desperate when they can't feed their families, put groceries on the table, and tens of millions of folks are out of work, and more of these temporary furloughs are becoming permanent layoffs. So I'm very hopeful that as we go to those negotiations, we can get supercharged benefits that are tied to conditions on the ground, the kind of marketplace conditions we've got out there in the real world. Now, on the subject of IRS oversight, I'm going to touch first on a stunning new report that shows how years of Republican budget cuts have led to wealthy tax cheats getting off scot-free. A new report by the Treasury Inspector General showed that over a 3-year period, the IRS failed to audit almost 900,000 wealthy taxpayers who skipped out on filing tax returns. Together, these wealthy taxpayers owed nearly $46 billion in taxes. I mean, colleagues, think of what we could do for hard-hit communities if you're talking about having that money, $46 billion in taxes that was owed to the American people. In nearly 370,000 of those cases, taxpayers had failed to respond to more than one delinquency notice from the IRS. Those individuals owed nearly $21 billion. And let's be clear, this isn't about shadowy networks of hard-to-trace shell companies. It wouldn't take a lot of complicated forensic accounting to start cracking down on tax cheats, because we're talking, colleagues, about people who simply would not file their return. Now, 2 issues stick out. First, Donald Trump says he's pro-law enforcement, but his administration hasn't taken any steps to crack down on these wealthy tax cheats who've stolen tens of billions of dollars from American taxpayers. After years of Republican bullying and gutting the IRS, audits of wealthy taxpayers are way down. So maybe it doesn't come as a surprise that Donald Trump isn't doing anything about it, given what we know about this president's long record of tax dodging and, in my view, outright fraud. Second, in my view, it's past time for Congress to reconsider how the federal government fights against tax cheating. Over a decade of Republican budget cuts, the IRS has lost 1/3 of its enforcement personnel and more than half of its revenue officers. This new Inspector General report shows, colleagues, how easy it is after these enforcement cuts to rip off taxpayers, for the wealthy to get away with cheating, and even those who don't bother to file their tax return. The burden of painful tax audits has been shifted unfairly onto those hardworking Americans who work for a living. So years of Republican budget cuts have made this a good time to be a rich tax cheat, and the Congress ought to change it. You don't actually believe in law and order if you advocate for cuts that allow wealthy tax cheats to get away with breaking the law. Commissioner Rettig, thanks for joining us this morning. And Mr. Chairman, I look forward to our question and answers after we hear from the Commissioner.
Before I give the introduction, there was something I was wondering about, whether or not we were going to extend the time beyond July 15th for filing. And I've just been informed that last night, Secretary Mnuchin announced that it would not be extending that filing, and he has the authority under law to do that. Now to introduce our witness, the Commissioner of Internal Revenue Service, Mr. Rettig. Prior to his present position, Mr. Rettig was a highly respected law firm partner in California for more than 36 years. There he represented thousands of individuals, businesses, corporate taxpayers before the IRS, the Department of Justice Tax Division, federal and state courts, and state taxing authorities. He has served as a member and chair of the IRS Advisory Council 2008 to 2011, chaired the taxation section of the Bar of California, and on advisory boards of both the Franchise Tax Board and the Board of Equalization in California. He's received numerous professional honors that I won't go through that list. He's been featured speaker at many tax conferences, both domestically and internationally, authored numerous tax-related articles. He has a BA in economics from UCLA, as well as J.D. with honors, Pepperdine University, Master of Law at New York University. Commissioner Rettig, we're pleased to have you here, and we'll have your opening statement, then we'll have questions.
Thank you. Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this year's filing season and the IRS's efforts to help taxpayers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Before I proceed, I would like to also extend my personal sympathies, as well as on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service, to the family and friends of Ed Kleinberg. I was familiar with Ed through his tenure at USC out in Los Angeles, and a better person did not exist, and a more supportive person, I think, for tax administration, guidance, and getting it right probably did not exist. So we are equally saddened to learn of the passing of Ed last evening. I remain extremely proud to be working with the Internal Revenue Service in my second year as commissioner, knowing that 96% of the gross receipts of our country flow through the Internal Revenue Service has strengthened my belief that a healthy, functional IRS is critical to the success and well-being of our country and our people. The IRS's rapid response to the pandemic serves to illustrate how critical it is for the agency to receive consistent, timely, and adequate multi-year funding such that we can succeed in providing the services our country deserves. IRS employees have worked around the clock since mid-March to implement major provisions of the CARES Act, especially the economic impact payments to help millions of Americans during this challenging time. As stated by the chairman, so far approximately 160 million economic impact payments have been distributed, totaling approximately $270 billion. However, there is more to do. The IRS remains focused on making sure every eligible American receives a payment. We are especially focused on getting payments out to the historically underserved communities of our nation, such as individuals experiencing homelessness. We realize how difficult the pandemic has been for so many Americans. For that reason, the IRS has also provided important administrative relief, postponing the filing and payment deadlines to July 15. And as you stated, Chairman, it will not be extended beyond July 15. But yesterday we issued a notice that had a variety of payment-related options that folks can look to. We also temporarily adjusted our processes to help people and businesses during these uncertain times under the IRS People First initiative. With respect to filing season, while we had to adjust and redeploy resources during the pandemic, our employees have remained dedicated to delivering the 2020 filing season as they continued to process electronic payments, issue direct deposit refunds, and accept electronic payments during the pandemic. As of June 19, we have processed more than 126 million individual returns, and we have issued more than 93 million refunds, totaling more than $257 billion. We're in the process of a phased-in reopening of some of our operations when and where it is safe to do so. In this regard, we are processing paper returns, we are tackling the backlog of mail and reopening our phone lines and adding phone assisters. We are prioritizing refunds and customer service operations, as well as the health and safety of our employees and everyone that we interact with. We will continue to follow and, where possible, exceed applicable safety guidelines and measures. The IRS is also committed to delivering on the promise of a new IRS. We continue to be extremely grateful to Congress for last year's strong bipartisan support in passing the Taxpayer First Act. We will put forth comprehensive strategies for a newly envisioned taxpayer experience operating through the eyes of the taxpayer. With respect to enforcement, the IRS is also committed to having a strong, visible, robust tax enforcement presence. During my tenure, we have shifted significant examination resources and technology to increase our focus on high-income taxpayers, especially those who have failed to file returns and those engaged in certain types of questionable transactions. With respect to the budget, by providing adequate funding, Congress can help the IRS deliver on its mission and build a stronger IRS for taxpayers as required by the Taxpayer First Act. The President's fiscal year 2021 budget requests an appropriation of $12 billion, as well as a program integrity cap. We are also asking for Congress's help legislatively by allowing the IRS greater flexibility to address correctable errors and improving IRS oversight of paid tax return preparers. Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, This concludes my statement, and I would be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Rounds. And it looks to me like what I got from the clerk here, most people are going to be remote. So I don't know whether people that are remote have the timer or not, but so if you do, then you know when you need to stop. But if you don't, and I see the 5-minute time up, finish your question. We'll let it be answered, and then we're going to quickly move on because I can't see you folks face to face. So that's the best way I can do it to keep things on time. Commissioner Rettig, last week the Government Accountability Office put out a report discussing the federal government's response to the COVID-19 crisis. That report included a review of the IRS's work on getting stimulus payments out to Americans. And one issue raised was that due to a glitch with the IRS non-filer tool, some stimulus recipients didn't receive the additional $500 for the children claimed on the form. The IRS estimated 450,000 stimulus recipients didn't receive the correct amount. I understand the IRS now intends to send these tax filers any additional amount when they are. So when can these tax filers expect to see these additional amounts? And then before you answer that, let me refer for a second part of the same subject. Senator Collins sent you a letter expressing similar concerns about those on Social Security with dependents missing out on an additional per child amount due to the April 22nd deadline for this group to use the non-filer tool. As you go back to account for the dependents for other non-filers, does the IRS intend to similarly send additional amounts due to any seniors who filled out the non-filer tool after April 22nd deadline?
Chairman, with respect to the first group, the individuals where the $500 payments were missed, I believe the figure is about 365,000. But in any event, we are going to be reissuing those $500 payments this summer. Similarly, we have an issue with respect to individuals who had filed injured spouse claims, and we're taking a look at those, and we anticipate reissuing those as well sometime. I believe it's during this summer, but we can verify that with you separately. With respect to the Social Security information folks, SSA folks, we're taking a look at that. We have some limitations on abilities and capacities to move things through, but we're sympathetic with trying to get as much funds out to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. So that I can't yet commit on, but we are taking a look at it.
Yeah. Next point is, for much of the filing season, IRS has operated on short staff due to this emergency. This has resulted in backlog. We have an IRS year's resolution system awaiting to be addressed. Many are returns filed by low-income taxpayers claiming the EITC and child tax credit. What steps is the IRS taking to clear this backlog, and how is the IRS prioritizing returns that were flagged for error resolution?
The EITC returns have an extreme priority, and I think you're aware, we brought people back, we brought employees back on a voluntary basis initially, and we've been bringing our people back week by week with a full staffing, given socially distancing, a full staffing under the new procedures by July 15. And we expect to move through the EITC claims as quickly as we can, but they have priority on what we're doing. We've allocated priority to refunds. We've allocated priority to customer service calls with our customer service representatives in the campus. Really, the taxpayer service side of the organization is what we've stood up first, and most importantly, that we're trying to address.
There's a significant mail backlog for the same reason that staff couldn't come to the office. We've even heard reports that you had to bring in tractor trailers or even rent extra storage space to store the mail. Awaiting processing, how long do you expect it to take for the IRS to address the backlog? And are there procedures in place to prioritize certain types of correspondence, such as tax returns and audit requests?
Paper returns are being prioritized in terms of going through the inventory, which I believe is currently around 12.3 million pieces of correspondence, which includes paper returns and other correspondence that we might have. We're focused on the paper returns because many of those also obviously will have EITC refunds and otherwise, but that's another focus.
Okay, with my 13 seconds left, I'll say, could you explain the reasoning for not screening out payments to the deceased from the start? Also, what procedures were eventually put in place to limit such payments as well as recover those that went out?
With respect to the decedent payments, the Internal Revenue Service followed the practice with respect to the payments that went out in 2008 for the stimulus payments. And after 3 weeks of issuing payments, Treasury and Council issued guidance indicating that decedents should not be receiving those payments. And so IRS changed the processing for that. Because there was no clarity in the CARES Act that decedents should not be receiving payments, the IRS administered the CARES Act as written. And then as Treasury came to the policy conclusion with Council that decedents should not be receiving the payments, we adjusted our filters after the third day and then input the death file.
Okay, Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, let's go to this infuriating new report from the Inspector General that found that millionaires are getting away without paying the taxes they owe. Between 2014 and 2016, nearly 5,000 taxpayers who owed at least $500,000 in unpaid taxes didn't file a return and weren't audited by the IRS. These 5,000 scofflaws owed a cumulative $15.7 billion over 3 years, and they got away with it. The report found that overall, hundreds of thousands of taxpayers with significant incomes were skipping out on filing tax returns and paying a cumulative $45.7 billion in taxes over 3 years, with the IRS doing nothing about it. I think this is just infuriating, and I hope that you're as angry about this too. And so my question is, we confirmed you here in this room almost 2 years ago. I've got to assume you learned about this outbreak of lawlessness I've described, and I want to know why you didn't call then Chairman Hatch and I up and say, hey, this is what's happened. It's outrageous. I want to stop it now. Here's what I need from the Finance Committee. And we never got such a call.
That report addresses a period of time before I was confirmed, as you're aware.
I understand that, Mr. Commissioner, but when you learned about it, why didn't you call the chairman, then Chairman Hatch, and I, and say, let's stop this?
We are stopping it.
No, you're doing various things with budgets and the like, and I'm interested in hearing it. But I'm asking you a specific question. When you learned about this, it seems to me this is priority business. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. And you all sure can find time to go after folks who get the earned income tax credit. Why didn't you call up Chairman Hatch and I and say, we've got to do something about it now? And this, in my view, should have been a call made almost 2 years ago. Why didn't you do that?
Senator, can I tell you what we are doing?
I
will call you, but I would like to tell you what we are doing.
Commissioner, I want to know first why, when you saw this going on shortly after you were confirmed, why you didn't say to this committee on a bipartisan basis, I've got to stop this. So answer that first and then tell me what you're doing now.
Shortly after I was confirmed, this issue was not brought to my attention. When this
Okay.
issue was brought to my attention.
Let's stop right there. So are you saying you and your staff didn't know that 900,000 individuals skipped out on filing their returns and paying the $46 billion they owed? Is that what you're telling us?
That report relates to tax years 2014, 15, 16. Can we
Right.
talk about what I did when I got on board, sir?
I want to know, yes, absolutely. I want to know what you did when you learned about that.
When I learned about that, and as a lot of this has been public, we changed certain folks with respect to certain positions in the Internal Revenue Service. We moved somebody from the criminal division of the Internal Revenue Service to a commissioner of small business self-employed. The deputy chief of criminal investigation is now the commissioner of small business self-employed. We created a fraud enforcement group headed by somebody who was a career IRS criminal enforcement, criminal investigation person. We created a promoter coordinator position. We recently added a significant counsel attorney to the fraud enforcement group. We have touched all non-filers that we are aware of with respect to 2017, 2018. We will with respect to 2019. For fiscal year 2019, we closed more than 364,000 automated substitute for return matters, resulting in nearly $6.6 billion in additional assessments. We have a non-filer strategic plan.
Okay. My time is essentially up, and I've given you an opportunity to respond. How much of the $46 billion or close to it has been recovered?
I don't have those figures, but I'm more than willing to meet with you or have our people meet
When
with
can
you.
we have those? Can we have those figures within a week? And the reason I want the answer, to at least to the best of your ability, is because we always hear about things that are being done in the future. And we hear about changes with respect to policy and new people being named and the like. But this is a brand new report. It's the latest report from the Inspector General, and it says that these scofflaws are making off with enormous sums of money that we need for priorities here at home. And I'm still trying to figure out when you actually learned about this and what you did to collect that money. So I'm over my time, and I would like a written response to my questions within a week, okay? Thank you.
Senator Thune, and then after that by remote, Senator Stabenow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Rettig, during the pandemic, medical professionals from around the country have come to hard-hit areas to help, forming an essential part of our medical response and saving countless lives. I believe these frontline healthcare workers are heroes and are deserving of our nation's profound gratitude. However, others, including some state leaders, believe that these individuals are deserving of something else: tax bills. I've introduced bipartisan legislation along with Senator Brown called the Remote and Mobile Workforce Relief Act, which would establish a special 90-day standard for healthcare workers who traveled to another state to fight the coronavirus and help ensure that these workers don't face surprise tax bills for the critical assistance that they've provided. Our bill also addresses the possible tax complications that could face remote workers as a result of the pandemic, including state withholding and nexus issues. I know the safety of IRS workers is paramount to you, Mr. Rettig, and that much of your workforce has had to work remotely as well. As a large national employer with a footprint in many states, is it safe to assume that you, too, are having to confront many of these same state tax withholding issues presented by remote work?
I believe that's accurate.
I would hope that we could make some progress on addressing that and provide certainty and clarity for a lot of these employees who are crossing state lines, in many cases, to provide assistance to help us defeat the coronavirus. So I'm hoping that that legislation can ride on whatever the next CARES package is. Mr. Rettig, this year the President's budget once again proposes to improve clarity and worker classification requirements. As you know, for the past two Congresses, I've introduced legislation that would do just that. My bill, the new GIG Act, addresses the classification of workers and creates a safe harbor based on objectives tests, both for income and employment tax purposes. What's new this year is just how much more important gig workers and gig work has become. During the pandemic, many of us have relied on these workers to deliver our food and groceries, among other necessities. But companies who have wanted to provide additional benefits to workers, from PPE to financial assistance, have hesitated to do so for fear that as a result of their support, they could accidentally see these workers be reclassified from independent contractors to employees. Would you continue to work with me to add the much-needed certainty to our worker classification rules so that companies can provide support to workers to help them stay safe during the pandemic?
Yes, sir.
During the, I had introduced legislation in March. It was a bipartisan bill that allowed the tax filing deadline to be extended from April to July. Shortly after that, you proceeded to approve that request, or Treasury Department, I should say, did. And yesterday, as the chairman noted, the IRS and Treasury announced the tax filing and payment deadline of July 15th would not be postponed. Could you speak to whether this decision was made in response to feedback you received from states regarding their own fiscal concerns? Is it your impression that small and medium-sized businesses have enough liquidity presently to pay their tax bills? Could you talk a little bit about that decision?
The decision ultimately was made by the Treasury, but we were interactive with various professional organizations, professional service organizations, both accounting, law, and otherwise. We were interactive with various states along the course of the path. And so the decision was sort of a cumulative decision after, I think there was, one of the organizations I know solicited 1,000 of its members to get input, and they were supportive of not postponing the July 15, and that basically the comment was that the businesses have started to settle into a degree of reality. But we also, in issuing the notice, the IRS issued a notice yesterday with a host of payment options for folks who might not be able to pay by July 15.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, would more separate deadlines be better or worse for taxpayers, would you say?
We're moving into, with respect to the IRS, we're always processing 2 filing seasons at once, and we're moving right into the next filing season that we have, and so it becomes a little cumbersome for us, but that was not taken into account. The IRS employees will rise to the challenge. But with respect to taxpayers, and particularly self-employed or unrepresented taxpayers, too many dates begins to get a little confusing in the trenches, and so giving some degree of certainty that they can move to and having us exercise discretion on the back end, I think, is the proper path forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired.
Senator Stabenow, and for everybody else that's remote, I don't know whether you know when the 5 minutes are up. I don't intend to cut you off right at 5 minutes, but if you hear a little tapping of the gavel like that, it means that I should go on to the next person. We got a lot of people. We got 24 people that want to ask questions today. Senator Stabenow.
I understand, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and our ranking member for holding the hearing, and thank you, Commissioner, for joining us today. It's a really important discussion. And I want to speak about the $1,200 economic impact payments that have been so vital to stabilizing so many American families during this pandemic. And I think along with the pandemic unemployment insurance, it's really allowed millions of families to just attempt to survive through all of this. Families in Michigan have received more than 4.8 million payments, the $1,200 payments. That's money helping people through the crisis. And I want to first thank you for working with the Social Security Commissioner and the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to ensure that people receiving Social Security and VA benefits would receive the EIPs without having to file tax returns. However, we have a lot of folks that still haven't gotten those payments. In fact, last week, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities estimated about 12 million families. I know we have estimated more than 300,000 families in Michigan that are eligible but have not received them because they didn't file tax returns or haven't used the IRS website. So these are likely to be our lowest income families, as disproportionately people of color. And they're people that, frankly, right now, as you know, the $1,200 and $500 per child is extremely, extremely important. So my first question is really basic. Does the IRS have an estimate of how many people are eligible for EIPs but have not yet received them?
Personally, I can tell you, I think the 12 million is significantly overstated, but I'm probably
Any
not,
idea? Do you have any, what do you think the right number is?
I'm probably not at liberty to give a number, but I would say it's overstated multiple times. But part of the difficulty here is we can't count people who we can't identify, and we can't issue payments to people we can't identify. So we have reached out, and personally, I've reached out to numerous folks around the country and thousands of different community organizations, including organizations involving homelessness and other arenas, which have a significant contingent of folks who have the ability to operate off the radar screen, if you will, with respect to the federal government.
No, and I appreciate that. In the interest of time, I'm just going to pursue that just a little bit more, because when we're talking about another COVID package, one of the things on the table is an additional $1,200 payment, which I hope will actually happen. But given that, what should we be doing in the current round in terms of getting people the payments that they deserve? And any future rounds, what should the strategy be with Congress? How should we write this? What can we do to support your efforts to make sure that the people who most need this help right now are able to get it?
There are some lessons learned, obviously, when you go through a process like this, including outreach to various state organizations that might be providing subsidies to members of the state that the federal government might otherwise be unaware of, and folks who do not otherwise have a filing obligation. Similarly, we've created what we refer to as toolkits. One is for members of Congress and the Senate, and then another one is for literally every type of organization you can consider. And we have a lot of information. We've actually put our information in more than 24 different languages, because there's a lot of situations with respect to certain communities that are also not interactive, but we can provide some information on a go-forward basis. And, the people we've been able to identify now, we have, and we can identify, and I think that that's hugely positive. But we have a significant...
If I might, I'm going to stop only just because finally, I just want to refer to the fact that, a lot of what we're talking about are folks that are unbanked. They don't have bank accounts, have difficulty opening bank accounts. I know that you sent stimulus payments via a debit card to some unbanked people, but unfortunately they weren't expecting it. A lot of people thought it was fraud and basically threw it in the trash. And so when we look at another round of statements and checks using a debit card, which I think can make sense as a strategy, what solutions can we avoid repeating? What problems can we avoid repeating with the people who didn't know it was coming and basically didn't take it seriously? Are you reaching out to them as well? Because the debit card would make sense to people that don't have a bank account, but there needs to be a strategy somehow to communicate with them to let them know it's coming.
Issuing payments by debit card was actually determined by the Bureau of Fiscal Services rather than by the Internal Revenue Service. We were just instructed to provide a file in a certain manner, and they made the determination of how those payments went out, whether it was by check or by debit card for unbanked people. But I think certainly, marketing, outreach, any kind of public service announcements, not only by the Internal Revenue Service, but by a number of other agents, federal agencies, state agencies, and similarly Congress. I don't think we can do too little.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Portman, by remote. Are you there, Senator Portman?
I am here, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Commissioner Rettig, thank you so much for being with us today, and more importantly, for your service. Your last year as IRS Commissioner must feel like 10 years, and we appreciate all the challenges you face and how you've handled it professionally. I'm going to ask a few questions about some concerns I have, but overall, let me say that I'm pleased you got those checks out as quickly as possible. There's been a lot of discussion of that this morning, but one data point that was in your testimony in 2008, it took us 10 weeks to get the first check out. 10 weeks into this one, we had about 90 to 95% of the checks out. And although I was hearing from a lot of my constituents about where's my check, I do think that that was one of the areas where we did best in terms of the legislation that we passed here in Congress and getting real help to people right away. It was needed. We may do it again, and so I think these questions are appropriate to ask. One is, what are you doing to correct some of the problems that were encountered, in particular those who did not have a bank relationship, were unbanked or didn't have up-to-date personal information, have had a tough time getting their checks. They log on to Get My Payment, which I've encouraged all of them to do, and my teletown halls and so on, and they find out their check's gone to another account they've never heard of, as an example. So these are folks who often are low income and need the checks more than anybody. So what's the status of some of these incorrect or non-delivered payments, and what steps are being taken to ensure that incorrect checks are being processed and reissued right away?
Reissuing checks is a priority for the Internal Revenue Service. We actually, take it very seriously, the concept of trying to get these payments out to the eligible Americans as quickly as possible. We put together those portals. The first portal with respect to the non-filers was put together was launched on April 10th. The portal with respect to Get My Payment was launched on April 15th. The Get My Payment portal, 14 million people successfully used it. The non-filers portal, 6.1 million people successfully used it. And 192 million people successfully verified the status of their payment on the Get My Payment portal. So we have moved forward with that information. But again, our focus is on the people who have, principally they're unbanked people who the IRS is essentially unaware of their existence. So identifying people and then trying to get payments into their hands. And I think that's one of the reasons why BFS moved to using debit cards. And as far as distribution of payments, one of the limitations was the BFS capacity was about 5 to 7 million checks per week. The Internal Revenue Service was more or less ready to go by April 10th with the information we had to launch the payments, which is how 81 million payments launched on April 10.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your focus on particularly those who are unbanked, because those are some of the folks who need it the most. The other question I have is about refunds this year. I have been surprised, frankly, to hear how many people filed prior to the deadline. We're now in the last couple of weeks before the deadline, and 138 million returns have been processed as of June 19, which is on par with the 137 million last year. So basically, even though you delayed the filing, most people didn't take advantage of that, in part because they wanted the refund. But I'm concerned that even though people have filed, they have not had their tax returns processed. As a result, there are many individuals, I'm told, as an example, nearly 5 million paper returns are sitting unprocessed at a processing center somewhere around the country, as well as the 10 million difference in refunds processed this year compared to last year. So we are taking people's tax returns early, but we're not processing them. As a result, these refunds are sitting in the federal treasury rather than going out to people as they should. This, of course, would be a de facto second stimulus. I mean, it would be huge if we could get this money out the door. So it seems to me that should be our top priority right now. We've received hundreds of inquiries from constituents who did not have the means to file electronically, who need their refund to just make it financially, to make ends meet, to make their car payment, to make their rent. Can you tell us what your plans are to process this backlog of paper returns in particular and ensure the remaining refunds get out the door as quickly as possible?
The paper returns are a high priority for the Internal Revenue Service in terms of processing, and I think we're running through that at about 1 million a week, reducing the backlog around 1 million a week. And so going through that and getting those out is a priority. Similarly, with respect to electronically filed returns that might have been called up in a fraud filter or identity theft situation, those are also priorities. So the refund side of the house is really the first thing for our customer service representatives. And I think currently we have about 8,300 folks working those two issues.
Well, I would urge you to redouble your efforts there. Again, when we're looking at what's happening right now in the economy, we've still got 10 million people out of work. We've still got ourselves in a recession, and getting these refund checks out is absolutely critical. And they're due people, so we have the information. It's something that can be done. I would think that would be a high priority. With regard to The issue of IRS reform, I've got a few questions for you. I will submit to the record because I want to keep to the chairman's time here. And I would just say that with regard to IRS reforms, we appreciate all you have done. We are looking forward to the restructuring report that is due by September 30th, 2020. The restructuring commission that I co-led back in '97 made a big difference, I think, in trying to improve the agency. It's time to do it again. So we look forward to that restructuring report, and I look forward to sending you some additional questions on IRS reform and getting your answer. And again, thank you for your service, Commissioner.
Senator Cassidy, by remote.
I thought we were going to a Democrat. I'm okay with that. Okay. Hey, Mr. Commissioner, thank you for being on.
She's coming here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but
Yes, I can.
Got you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Listen, a couple things right off the bat. I know Senator Menendez and I are collaborating. He's going to ask you a couple more questions. But I just want to quickly point out that our bipartisan bill, the SMART Act, attempts to provide some state and local relief. Let me ask you, though, to set the stage for that. Do you agree that much of the current fiscal crisis facing the state and local governments is related to the pandemic that caused revenues to fall off the cliff, not mismanagement by that local city and that state government?
I personally have not analyzed that. We've been, quite frankly, we've been working seven days a week, 12, 15 hours a day since March. I am aware of, certainly the private sector and the government sector being shut down and the pandemic having impact.
Sounds great. Okay. I know Senator Menendez will follow some more on that. Let me ask you this. Regarding conservation easements, there's neighborhoods in downtown New Orleans, which have been in Shreveport and Baton Rouge, which have been revitalized by the historic preservation easement. I know there's been a review of conservation easements, but it seems that the historic preservation easements are kind of caught up in that, which are a fraction of the conservation easements. So it doesn't seem like the IRS's evaluation of conservation easements has drawn a distinction between the historic property and the land conservation. Would the IRS be willing to create a safe harbor for those who wish the preservationists who wish to use the program with integrity, which is the way Congress, of course, intended?
It would be subject to Treasury with respect to policy on issues like that, but we would certainly be willing to take a look at it. And a distinction between historic easements and the conservation easements is the syndicated conservation easements. The Internal Revenue Service is supportive of historic easements. It's supportive of legitimate conservation easements. In the syndicated arena, we have seen significant abuse, and that's where a significant part of our enforcement effort has been and will continue to be.
Got it. Well, that's good. I'll also say, and I don't know if this is you or Treasury, but it seems that sometimes the holdup seems to be that the easements are being denied over mandatory changes. For example, put in an ADA compliant wheelchair ramp, which it's a little bit of a catch-22. You get busted if you don't put it. You don't do well if you do put it, and so that's of a concern. There's also an issue. I'm sorry, here my computers. I'm trying to follow more than one computer right now, so I apologize for the delay. There's also the issue of administering the COVID-19 relief. I'm interested in paid leave tax credits provisions, which are contained within HR 6201. Could you give your insights on the administration of these paid leave tax credits? My colleagues and I are contemplating other legislation in the paid leave space, and would love your thoughts on this.
As tax administrators on behalf of the country, we are doing our best to administer every one of these provisions. They're really relief provisions to provide relief for businesses in this context and individuals and whatnot. So I can tell you from our perspective, we have prioritized this entire arena, and we're doing our best.
Okay, is the program going well, or do you see hiccups, or is there something which Congress needs to help you address?
I'm not aware of today. I'm not aware of something that I would say is a hiccup, but we would relish the opportunity to meet with members of Congress and others who are looking at creating a bill and trying to provide our assistance, meet with staff for anybody.
So I have one more question, which is my remaining time. We have some companies which have employees, U.S. employees, who work for foreign corporations overseas. Think the guy that's working in a energy sector and he's doing something off the coast of Israel with natural gas development. I'm told that the IRS released guidance saying that the activities of these foreign workers trapped in the U.S. Right now because of travel restrictions would not result in the foreign corporation being deemed to have a U.S. trade or business or having a permanent establishment in the U.S. I think the ask is, can you release more formal guidance? There's a little bit of concern about relying only on an online FAQ, and a formal IRS notice would be preferable. If that's impractical, can you update the FAQ to include the documentation necessary to prove the travel impairment?
Guidance would be a Treasury policy call, but I will take that back.
Senator Menendez. Senator Menendez. Okay, Senator Langford. Senator Langford. Okay, Senator Carper was here in person, so I'll go to Senator Daines by remote. You suppose our systems broke down or anything? Senator Cardin?
I'm here.
Go ahead, Senator Cardin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you very much for your service and being here today to fill us in. First, I want to thank you for figuring out a way that we can get checks out to those non-filers for their dependents this summer rather than having to wait to file for refund in the next tax season. I know that would be a terrible inconvenience, and I thank you for your commitment to find a way to deal with this. I do want to talk a little bit about the Taxpayer First Act. The chairman mentioned it in his opening statement. We recognize that COVID-19 has challenged the implementation of that law that requires the IRS to be more customer friendly, that deals with training, that deals with several of these issues that we've been working on for a long time as members of the Senate Finance Committee. Can you just very briefly tell me how you have been impacted on implementing that act as a result of COVID-19?
Unfortunately, Senator, we have been impacted. We had to redeploy resources, as you can imagine, in a number of different arenas. And I think somewhere within 2 to 3 weeks ago, we sent a letter up indicating that we probably will need to move the September date to later this year, November, December. We're working very hard on it, and the IRS takes the experience of taxpayers quite seriously. I think you're aware of the fact that that's a significant purpose as to why I did come on board, was because of my experience on the outside and trying to make things better for everyone who interacts with the Internal Revenue Service. Every employee of the Internal Revenue Service wants to do more, wants to do their best, and Taxpayer First Act is quite an opportunity and a privilege for us to actually move the Internal Revenue Service into the arenas where I think we are actually doing things through the eyes of the taxpayer as opposed to through the eyes of a federal agency. And we are also looking at the organizational structure. We've had more than 1,000 interactions in terms of focus groups and direct interactions and comments and such, receiving information from all over. We do have TFAO at irs.gov. Anybody can submit a comment there in terms of that, but we're working very hard. But we did get pushed back with respect to COVID. We were doing really well, and
Mr. Commissioner, let me make this suggestion. There's lots of members of our committee that are very interested in this. I would suggest that we have an opportunity for briefings so that we understand exactly what you're trying to do. We certainly understand that COVID-19 will impact the time schedule here, but we would urge you to keep us informed. I want to cover 2 other points if I can briefly. One, to deal with the employee retention credit. We know that there's been some credits that have been given. We would welcome your thoughts as to how that program has been implemented. We know the House is interested in modifying that program. We're going to be looking at legislation, I hope soon, in regards to the next stimulus package. The retention credit was one of our major IRS initiatives. What challenges have you found in trying to implement that law?
Unfortunately, there have been a degree of fraud for folks who actually looked at it as an opportunity to take advantage of a really good program designed to help a lot of businesses as well as employees. We think we're pretty good in terms of identifying the fraud. We have some indicators and we have some filters, but I think you've probably seen a number of the prosecutions. I think the quickest prosecution was within about 2 weeks. Individual was indicted within about 2 weeks of when they submitted some paperwork. That's an arena that we would like to have, I think, some input on in terms of maybe how we can limit that. You know, in terms of the entire CARES Act, there have been quite a few scams, for lack of a better word, and we've devoted quite a few resources to that, as has Treasury Inspector General's office. So we would welcome the opportunity to meet with staff or meet with members to explore options.
Well, I'll make sure we follow up with our staff. The last point I want to mention is that the CARES Act did provide some relief in regards to retirement security by allowing relief from the required minimum distributions and some other provisions. These are temporary issues. We know that in regards to retirement security, it's going to be impacted by COVID-19. We're looking at some substantive changes. Senator Portman and I have introduced legislation that would provide additional help for small businesses, for part-time workers, for low-income workers. I would just urge that we work together and get your experiences during COVID-19 as to how we can use the Internal Revenue Code to encourage more retirement security options for vulnerable workers.
We would welcome the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. Now, would the people for Menendez, Langford, Carper, or Daines, if you want to be recognized, please tell the staff. So I skipped over you to go to Cardin. Senator Bennett would be next. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You weren't here a little while ago. Senator Carper, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go. Let me yield it. Go ahead to whoever you're going to.
No. Well, then let's go to Senator Bennett, and then I'll come back to Senator Carper.
Thanks so much.
Senator Bennett, are you available?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing. Thank you to Senator Carper for yielding. Thank you, Commissioner Rettig, for all you're doing. As you know, the IRS created a non-filer portal allowing households to register for their $1,200 economic impact statement. However, unbeknownst to its users, the portal seems to have created a limited tax return, or in effect filed a tax return as a formality for these households. Later, when these taxpayers attempted to file a full 2019 return to receive their child tax credit or earned income tax credit, they were prevented from doing so. And it's my understanding that though they can still file a paper return, the IRS has limited capacity to process paper, and until late June was not processing paper returns at all. And I suspect that if I understand this correctly, there are a lot of people that are going to become discouraged when unable to file online, and as a result, as many as 5 to 10 million households don't have a clear way to file taxes and no way to claim the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. Until a suitable online system is put in place to deal with this filing trap created by the IRS's system, millions are going to go without the money they desperately need. For example, a mother of 3 who received $2,700 in economic impact payments, but could be eligible for double that amount, or about $5,200 in EITC, but she's unable to claim it because she's in this so-called filing trap. So let me ask you first, can you confirm that the non-filer portal is filing tax returns on behalf of these taxpayers and the users of that portal?
The purpose for those individuals, the purpose of the non-filer portal was for them to be able to provide us with dependent information, which was the additional $500 per qualifying child to get that in. And also, we're about to issue guidance for these individuals to file a paper return. It'll be marked amended EIP return. We'll have specific guidance. Amended EIP return in paper. We will extract those from the mail and process those on an expedited basis.
Can I ask you, first of all, Commissioner, thank you for doing the outreach on the additional $500 payment. You and I had a conversation about the importance of that payment. But is there no way is there a reason why this can't be done in a more expeditious way and online? Although I appreciate you're saying that the payments are going to be prioritized, it feels like it's going to be slower than these people would need to get these payments.
We're trying to get things to come in through certain portals, which actually expedites our ability to look at certain things. I can't commit to another lane for having this come in. Right now, this will be the lane that we will be announcing, and we will be expediting it. We also, I think you're aware, we have specific email for members of the House with a house.gov or a senate.gov. And so if you have folks reaching out to you on these issues, you can forward that to us. And those emails are handled on an expedited basis as well with respect to your constituents. We've truly tried, given the fact that our employees are dealing with the same thing everyone else in the country is, and we have around 56,000 employees currently teleworking. We have worked really hard to try to address as many issues as we can, and I continually today saying this is a priority, that's a priority, and those are accurate statements. And when I use the word priority, it's knowing that we have the human resources to back that up. We also have the employees who have the desire to make this happen. Our people care, and they care a lot.
And I'm sure that they do. I appreciate that. Let me just ask a final question for you to either answer or consider whether there's anything preventing the IRS from automatically paying childless EITC benefits to households that are in this situation using the W-2 data that the IRS already has on file? Or is there any other way that you think it could be expedited or, in a sense, automated, given the difficulty, the challenges that the agency's facing, but also the dire need that so many of our families are in?
When I came on board is when I learned a lot about the EITC, and interestingly, I was in a room with some IRS employees who've been there since 1975 and 1976 who've been working on EITC since then. About 98% of all refunds are are processed accordingly and paid within 21 days. It's that 2%, and the 2% get held up for a number of reasons. A large percentage of those would be in the EITC arena. We devote a lot of resources to trying to figure out, as do members of Congress and Senate and others, trying to figure out how to make that program more efficient and quicker, because at the end of the day, these are subsidies that get into the hands of the people that truly need them.
Senator Carper.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rettig, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your service, and our thanks to the people who work with you, the folks that you lead across the IRS. A difficult job, a thankless job, but we're grateful for all you do. I could just give you a word of advice to follow up on Senator Wyden's questioning of why didn't you call? The chairman and Senator Wyden. Sometimes folks that are new in jobs, like even your job, are reluctant to reach out and just to, like as a human being, and call and say, by the way, I know I'm new at this. But this is something that I ought to share with you. I would urge you to do that. Some folks are really good at it. Robert Lighthizer, trade rep, was here a couple of weeks ago. He is really good at doing that. And I would just ask you to keep that in mind. A couple of things. One, with respect to the kind of resources that we provide, I've been looking at the numbers, and it looks like from sort of like a high point in about, I want to say 2010 to the last year, we saw in terms of real resources provided to the IRS is a significant drop. I think the budget proposal for the next year, 2021, is an improvement, modest, but an improvement nonetheless. But John Koskin, and former commissioner, used to come here and plead with us for additional resources, plead for us with the authority to hire people with kind of technical skills that are needed for some of these complex tax returns. Just talk to us about the people, the human resources that are needed, the folks with technical skills. Are you able to hire those? Are you able to find them? Are you able to bring them on board and put them to work?
The Taxpayer First Act gave us streamlined critical pay, and we have been exercising that, and it's principally with respect to cyber and IT. That is a huge benefit to the agency. It allows us to get on a more even-keeled basis to compete for folks in that regard. All of federal government has difficulty onboarding people. There's a time lag in onboarding people. So when we meet them to try to get them on board, they are approached by us.
It could take months, right?
Yep.
Maybe even longer.
I have actually taken to, in the town halls and interactions with our employees, referring to our employees as IRS ambassadors, and that when you're out and about, either with private sector folks or with folks from other agencies, let them know how great it is to work for the Internal Revenue Service, bring those people into our agency, particularly the ones that we can get on board quickly. We do have resource issues from the human perspective. Significant percentage of our employee base is eligible to retire over the next few years. We had essentially no real hiring from 2011 to 2018. We were able to hire last year. We are hiring this year, but it's difficult to replenish on the attrition. So we go up, I think our enforcement side of the house went up about 1%, even with some considerable hiring. This also brings in the...
I'm going to ask you to stop right there. I think the point's well made. I want to refocus a little bit, if I can, on Free File. When I was a congressman a million years ago, I used to hold town hall meetings, hundreds of them. And every year, along about the middle of March, we only have 3 counties in Delaware. I'd host town hall meetings in all 3 counties. About mid-March, a month before the filing deadline, we'd invite IRS to come send people. We'd invite the Delaware Division of Revenue to send people. We'd literally help people with their taxes. We'd help from the experts. And we did that. I was a congressman in the House for like 10 years. We did it for almost 10 years. As it turns out, there's a better way to do that now in terms of providing assistance and advice, and it's something called Free File, which most people don't even know exists. And I think in the country, there's close to 100 million taxpayers, who could actually take advantage of this, get help filing their taxes, and it's free. But relatively few people, just a couple of million actually use that. Senator Rob Portman, who was on was questioning you just a few minutes ago, he and I are the leads on this permanent subcommittee in the Senate on investigations. And one of the things we've delved into over the last year is what's going on here. How can we actually make sure that this program is there to help people? I like to say if there's a tree that falls in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it, is it really a noise? Well, if there's a good program, a very helpful program that's free, like Free File, why aren't more people using it? What can you do? What can the IRS do? And what can we do to help enable you provide that better access to that kind of information?
The IRS promotes it to the extent that the IRS can. It has not had a marketing budget, I think, essentially since 2001, I think, when it started. IRS resources and the allocation of those resources is a lot of effort that goes into where a dollar should go, and a dollar for marketing versus a dollar for answering a phone call or the equivalent, or cyber. We have to be aware of a lot of different things. I'm a huge proponent of Free File. It helps the right people. Free File combined with VITA, tax counseling for the elderly, military VITA, I think make a huge difference. And I know the report that came out, and I agree with this, is outreach and knowledge. IRS issues guidance or issues a press release. It doesn't necessarily get to the person at the corner grocery store, et cetera, right? So having people become aware of it is a significant issue. If you don't know of Free File, you're not going to use it. So I think that's a hurdle to it. But this year it had, I think, so far, 27% increase in usage, not including the non-filers portal, but the Free File Alliance was instrumental in helping us launch the non-filers portal for EITC by April 10. And, CARES Act came out March 27. We launched that portal April 10. And the Free File Alliance was a significant help to us in getting that done.
Right.
So,
Senator,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, there's something we can do about this. And I'm very, very encouraged by what the commissioner said. This is a good program. We need to make sure people know about it.
Senator Menendez now by remote.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, Earlier this year, the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration concluded an investigation that I requested into potential abuses of the 45Q credit for carbon capture and sequestration by big fossil fuel companies. The IG confirmed that these companies had, in fact, incorrectly claimed almost $900 million in 45Q credits. Of the 10 companies claiming 99.9% of the 45Q credits, the IG found that only 3 had the required monitoring, reporting, and verification plans in place with the EPA. I subsequently wrote a letter to you urging the IRS to take a number of steps to both ensure that companies that have previously incorrectly claimed the credit are held accountable, and to ensure that these abuses don't continue moving forward. I sent that back on April 29th. And last night at 6 p.m., I got an answer to my April 29th letter. I understand that the IRS has examined a portion of the incorrectly claimed credits and retroactively denied them, and that some additional portion may be currently under audit or could come under audit in the near future. However, in your response, you also declined to commit to auditing all previous claimants of the 45Q credit to ensure that they are in compliance, and you would not commit to implementing a campaign to examine claimants going forward. You said, quote, the IRS cannot initiate examinations on a select group of taxpayers without proper justification, documentation, and approvals. But Commissioner, if the facts that I've discussed here today supported by an investigation of the Inspector General doesn't constitute proper justification and documentation, I don't know what does. I understand that the IRS has limited resources, but it seemed clear to me that ensuring compliance with the 45Q carries a significant return on investment for the American taxpayer. So let me ask you again in person, will you commit to auditing all previous claimants of more than $10,000 in 45Q credits and initiate a campaign to examine future claimants to ensure compliance?
Senator, we are exercising our best efforts with respect to the 45Q credit. We take compliance seriously. We continue to apply significant audit resources in this arena. And as I believe that TICTA report also states, the IRS examiners have consistently denied the credit. And I think of the pool that they were looking at, the examiners denied about 60% of those credits. And I will commit to trying to exercise our best efforts there, but we have to balance that. We have similar, as Senator Wyden opened with, we have similar areas that we need to also devote resources. We only have 6,430 revenue agents.
I appreciate
have the ability
that,
to do that, sir.
I appreciate that, and I have been someone who supported resourcing the IRS so you can do
We appreciate that.
your job. But the bottom line is 45Q was put in to incentivize cleaner energy production and innovate new technologies. And if 900 million is what we got back already, I can just imagine what's available. So it's well worthy. Let me quickly turn to one other question. The COVID pandemic has devastated our cities and local communities, which have been forced to set up and provide an unprecedented level of services. The consequences have had a real drain from Texas to Colorado, from South Carolina to New Jersey. No state is immune. We've had 1.4 million American workers, ultimately all in the public service field, the people who we need the most on the front lines. You're our nation's top tax official. Do you think that state and local governments would be facing the immediate fiscal crisis they're experiencing if it weren't in the middle of a pandemic and recession that caused revenues to fall off a cliff?
Senator, I think I answered this question earlier. Came out in a different format, but I've not been focused on the state and local governments. I am aware of the impact universally public and private sectors by having so many individuals out of work, businesses shut down, and people home, as well as the consequences for the health and safety side, which obviously increases expenses for a lot of individuals. And, I'm
Let me
personally.
ask you this: if we had 3 or 4 million public employees laid off, we're going to have a lot less federal revenue come to the nation's treasury because those people aren't going to be paying, right?
So we are in that mode of, we have 56,000 employees teleworking. Of the balance of the employees, the ones who have non-portable work, who need to come in, we need to, be socially distanced and the rest. And it's, we are trying to accomplish, for example, examinations, telephones, processing returns and whatnot, with a limited workforce.
I was referring to that if you had 3 or 4 million people laid off, not furloughed, working remotely, that at the end of the day, the consequences is going to be millions of people who aren't paying their federal taxes. That's going to cost a lot more to the federal treasury.
Senator Warner. Senator Warner, I was told you were available.
Senator Warner.
Are you there, Senator Warner?
Yes, I am here.
I see you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Rettig, one, thank you for your testimony today, and echoing what a number of the other members have said. I want to thank you, in particular the men and women of the IRS, for what they've been doing to implement the CARES Act. It really is extraordinarily significant. And I want to start my question today on one of the tools that was in the CARES Act, the Employee Retention Tax Credit, what's been called the ERTC. I think this is an extraordinarily significant addition to the legislation. It was something I was personally involved with Secretary Mnuchin, and it's gotten very favorable response from the Treasury. I know in the House, next version of CARES, there was an enormous expansion of the ERTC. And I've been working with a number of my Democratic colleagues, although there is a Republican parallel effort that would further utilize the ERTC. Our effort is called the Paycheck Security Act, which would again greatly expand this tool. And as you know, Commissioner, one of the key components of the ERTC is this allows companies to, in a sense, keep their payroll tax deposits to be applied against the ERTC. So it helps them with their cash flow. If their ERTC credit is greater than their payroll tax deposits, they would file a new form, which I appreciate you guys creating very quickly, Form 7200, that advances future payroll tax payments so that it becomes this refundable credit. Now, we know so far there's not been that many firms that have filed the 7200, so they have not. The current credit is fairly modest, so we don't know the full take-up rate because there may be a number of people that have simply withhold their payroll taxes and haven't had to use the Form 7200. But if we're looking at expansion of this tool, one of the things I'm really concerned about, that so far at least, the IRS has only utilized a fax filing form of Form 7200 rather than an e-filing form. And I just would like to know, why is that the case? And if Congress is looking, it's a high priority and Congress is looking at a major expansion of the ERTC, it seems to me that we need you to focus on updating the filing, because I got to imagine you got to take that fax form and convert it to an online form. Why not have that online form available from the outset? Can you address that and tell me where we might get that updated?
We actually were quite proud of the fact that we got the paper form out for eFax as quickly as we did on the 7200. We are taking a look at all options to try to streamline all interactions with us going forward. And it's probably best that I get back to you on the ability to do that. I think you're aware we just created the ability to electronically file amended income tax returns. It takes quite a bit of programming, and our IT department, our IT individuals are spectacular, but we have quite a few projects, not to lessen the importance of this by any stretch of the imagination.
I would simply say, Commissioner, Commissioner, I would simply say, I do appreciate the fact that you got 7,200. It's a new form. You got it out. But I think this is one of those unique spots where you've got the administration with Treasury thinking ERTC is very prominent. You've got the House already doing a greatly expanded version. You've got a number of us on the Democratic side who's got an expanded use. We hope to get into the next COVID package. A number of my Republican colleagues, like Senator Hawley and Senator Gardner, have got a variation on this, which also uses the ERTC. So I really hope you will bump this up higher on the list. Let me move in my last couple of seconds to the another area. I've been focused for a long time on gig workers and easing their tax compliance. I asked the GAO to publish a major study. They did come back. For example, the GAO team suggested that IRS make several changes to update instructions for both Form 1040 and including adding a reference to Form 1099K. Just generally speaking, in the last few seconds, gig workers are not going away. We've got to make tax compliance easier. Can you talk about what you hope to do to ease the gig workers' tax compliance issues?
Yeah, we're looking at a lot of different facets of the gig workers. I think there's a study out there that says that there's a significant portion of their receipts go to expenses, and so the net probably isn't what we would think it might otherwise be. But we're looking at a lot of different options to ease their ability to comply, and it's not limited to gig workers. It's actually pretty pervasive to all folks who might be in the realm of an independent contractor.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I just really want to keep working with you on this, and this is going to be an area that's only going to grow, and again, would appreciate your cooperation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Look forward to the opportunity.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and the ranking member for holding this hearing. Many of the activities that must take place to keep the housing credit production on schedule have been impacted by the steps states and local governments have taken in response to the coronavirus. And over the last few months, we've seen significant interruptions to construction activities, shortages of material, and delays. As a result, many properties will be unable to meet certain programmatic deadlines. The National Council of State Housing Agencies sent the IRS and Treasury a letter in March asking the IRS to extend programmatic deadlines and provide other flexibilities needed in these current circumstances. It was signed by over 200 organizations. The IRS has not yet given guidance on this, so I'm concerned that if we don't act soon, we're going to really impact the affordable housing market even more frustrated than it already is. So is that guidance forthcoming?
Let me get back to you as to whether that's going to be forthcoming. I believe it's on the Treasury side that the response is coming, but let me get back to you on that, and I will look into that.
Do you understand how important it's?
For sure.
We don't have enough housing, affordable housing, period. Now the problem's going to be more exacerbated by the COVID crisis, and a little guidance could help us keep some projects, because every project is valuable for helping us solve this problem. I noted to some of my colleagues how hospitals are now paying for affordable housing just to keep the people out of the emergency room, because if they can keep them in affordable housing, then they're not going to show up in the emergency room every day. So this is a pervasive problem. I wanted to ask you about, according to the National Taxpayer Advocacy, well, in March, as a result of coronavirus, IRS closed its offices, and so I want to ask about taxpayer assistance. According to the National Taxpayer Advocate, the only resources readily available are at the IRS.gov website and automated phone lines. So many Washingtonians rely on in-person assistance, including the elderly. So what are the steps taken to serve those that require that kind of assistance?
All phone lines are open. Our tax will be open by mid-July. Taxpayer assistance centers will be open by mid-July. We have 358 taxpayer assistance centers. 31 are not staffed full-time, but we do rotate folks in there, and we have people doing a circuit. We also, not only IRS, but a lot of folks use Vita sites for a variety of different things, and 10,500 of 11,000 and change of the Vita sites shut down. All of the AARP Vita sites shut down. So we've been really working as hard as we can, and we're trying to ramp up as quickly as we can. maintaining, safety and health reasons, health for our employees as well as for people who interact with us. We had to modify our tax in terms of, normally it's come in and sit down at a desk. The tax that are opening will handle matters by appointment only, but our history is that over 50%, 50, who contact a TAC for an appointment, their matter is handled actually on that call. So we are actually.
But they're not getting caught in some automated system that is, telling
There's a
them to
person
wait
that answers
now,
the phone for a TAC.
that they can get to.
They answer the phone, and the TACs are local. They're retail. They're right out there.
Okay, what steps are we taking to serve people who are filing for the earned income tax credit?
Their EITC is one, about 98% of the folks who file for that, it goes through. In the 2%, we have a lot of complexities involved there in terms of if Congress, with the Internal Revenue Service, with Treasury, with everybody else, could take a hard look at the statutory authority there and the definition particularly of a qualifying child. That's where we launch. We get claims for EITC. The claims essentially are for people who, for one or many reasons, are deserving of the funds that are coming. But there's a tremendous amount of problems for us to be able to verify a qualifying child when there is no link in the system. It does not need to be the parent of a child to be a qualifying child. Similarly, over 51% of EITC claims are done by return preparers, and we have continually asked for oversight of return preparers. Similarly, we have continually asked for correctable error authority. We cannot adjust an EITC claim on our own with information we otherwise have in our system, which would allow us to not have to go to a deficiency type procedure when there's.
I see my time is expiring. So can we show you language that you can tell us whether you think that would give you the flexibility you need?
I'm available after this hearing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here and for all of the work that you and your staff are doing on recovery efforts underway at the IRS. I want to start first by just thanking you for heeding the calls of my committee colleagues and myself to deliver stimulus payments automatically to the millions of Social Security and VA beneficiaries who do not file tax returns. And towards that end, I want to follow up on something that Chairman Grassley asked you about. Unfortunately, many of these beneficiaries missed out on $500 payments for their children because of short deadlines to provide the IRS with dependent information. And the IRS has said that these families will need to wait until 2021 to get their payments. Along with colleagues on this committee, I sent you a letter in April urging you to provide these payments as quickly as possible before 2021. You just referenced in your answer to the chairman that you were considering doing that, but there were some limitations. So could you tell us, please, what specifically you are considering and what specific limitations the IRS is facing with regard to getting these payments to people before 2021?
We have a pool of individuals who used our non-filers portal that should have actually received that additional $500 payment. We had that information. It for a limited period. Remember, that portal was, I'm very proud of the effort of our employees, but we built several airplanes while we were flying.
I understand.
2 other airplanes, and then we had to adjust those as we were monitoring. Right. And one of the things we found was we had a gap where it was not picking up those $500 payments, and we had that information. So we are going to be issuing those payments to that pool, and I believe the number is 365,000 individuals, and I believe it's substantially SSA and RRA recipients. So that, I believe, is going to happen sometime around July, by the end of July. That's my understanding, and if that date changes, we'll get back. Similarly, the individuals who filed injured spouse claims, there was a difficulty connecting that, get the payments out as rapidly as possible, find information that might not be front and center, so we did our best, and I'm very proud of how we did. Lessons learned going forward, we know certain areas to look into. And the limitations are we're actually also in the middle of programming now, or starting to program now, 2021 filing season. We constantly have 2 filing seasons that our IT departments are working on. Okay, so we're sympathetic with these issues, trying to figure out a way to get the money as quickly as possible.
And when can you get us information then to this committee about what that timeline looks like? I mean, we have constituents who need these dollars. They're entitled to them. They're trying to get them. They've been trying to do their best. So when can you give us a timeline of what the windows look like for them and how they might get those $500
We will not be able to
payments?
issue what I might now refer to as secondary payments for everyone who might have a change in circumstances. Remember, some people were married, some got divorced.
I'm not
and
talking
children.
about that. I'm talking
Those
about,
pools?
Commissioner, hold on. I'm talking about the people, you put up a very short window for people who were non-filers to put in information so that they could get those $500 payments. You now are saying that for the people you missed who did submit information in those 48 hours, you're going to be able to get them out. So now what I'm asking is the people who weren't able to get into that 48-hour window, if they give it to you now, how can they get it before 2021? What's the plan, and when will you share the plan with us?
Let me get back to you. It's not an easy thing for us to accomplish. And can I address the 48-hour window?
Yeah, I understand that it exists, and I have another question, so why don't we take that offline? And again, I appreciate how hard everybody was working. People just need these dollars, right?
Appreciate it.
So another question is, employers can claim new tax credits to help stay afloat during the COVID-19 crisis, including credits for providing paid leave and retaining employees. In order to rapidly provide this assistance, the Treasury sends advance payments of these tax credits to employers that file requests with the IRS. However, although the IRS has said these payments will be delivered to employers within 2 weeks, reports indicate that these payments may be taking significantly longer. So could you tell us, please, Commissioner, how quickly the IRS is delivering advance payments to employers, and is the IRS proactively planning for a possible increase in requests for these payments as states partially reopen their economies?
I'll get back to you with some specifics, but I believe that we've actually processed about a third of those so far that have come through, and then some we've asked for additional verification.
Right. And again, this is a matter of cash flow for businesses that are just desperately struggling.
We appreciate
to stay
that.
afloat.
We are trying our best.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Langford? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thanks for the testimony and the conversation today. It's exceptionally important to be able to walk through this, and I do appreciate your testimony very much today. I talked to some of my caseworkers back in state, talked to me about the Taxpayer Advocate Service and some of the work that's happening there and their interaction with the IRS staff. Because of COVID-19 and the downsizing, it's been very, very difficult to be able to get answers to questions and to be able to go through this process and to be able to help some taxpayers at this point. Walk me through both the closures of IRS offices, the re-engagement of employees, lessons that can be learned. I'd also be interested to be able to know not only when are we going to get things back going again so people can get answers to questions, but what can be done for the future, protecting private information of individuals, but knowing that if we have to be able to work remotely, we can actually get the work done again.
For good or bad, I'm the person that started shutting down our facilities, and at one point over 90% of our facilities were closed. We took the health and safety of our employees as a significant priority, and that created a lot of difficulty for others. We work closely with NTEU throughout. I myself work closely with NTEU as well as others in the IRS. We are now, by July 13, essentially all of our processing facilities will be open. All of our call centers will be open, understanding that open is a relative term for socially distanced, working different schedules, working different shifts, having folks spread out. We have people on the ground in each of our facilities essentially monitoring the issues to keep our employees safe. But, like everybody else, we're worried about interactions that might happen and, a potential spike at a facility. So we are doing everything we can to get back online. We had 56,140 individuals teleworking. We processed about 14,000 laptops for people who have telework work, but were not telework eligible, did not have the facilities and whatnot. So We're able to get laptops. There's a training session that goes on with respect to that, certainly with respect to security. And a large portion, as you can imagine, of the work we do is not telework eligible for security and other similar matters. I can, with confidence, say that our IT folks are as good as it gets. They are tremendous. They care. They work really hard. And they have moved mountains to get us as efficient as we possibly could be in this unprecedented pandemic.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much to re-engage into that. Are there lessons that can be learned that if we have to have more folks teleworking that can carry over from what we faced right now into the future in ways to be able to protect that private information but still get the work done?
And significantly, the folks on the phone, customer service representatives, to get a large portion of them able to work remotely, I think would have helped significantly. Let me just say that. And we're headed in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Let us know what we need to do to be able to help it head in that direction because that will be a significant gain for the future. As we not only look at space and cost, there'll be greater use of telework, I would assume, in the future. But if there are other issues that come up, we want to be able to make sure that we.
Yeah, I have to express my appreciation. You know, you all have been incredibly supportive of us, and we realize there are issues, and unfortunate there's issues that come out of this. But I think that universally, you all have been incredibly supportive, and as important as it is to the country and to the IRS as an agency, it's important to our people. Our employees are the strength of our agency, and they hear when you make comments, and sometimes senators and members of the House have made comments that I circulated in all employee messages because during this time, that's about all we can give our people in terms of a pat on the back. They are working really hard, and I'm privileged.
And we are exceptionally grateful to them. And they're under enormous pressure and having to be able to shift in ways that they had never anticipated and the rest of the country had not anticipated. Absolutely. As we get closer and closer to the July 15th deadline, there's more and more pressure for answers and solutions, and they're feeling the weight of that as well. So definitely tell them that we appreciate the work and the transition and what we can provide in the days ahead. We want to be able to do that. On charitable giving, I just want to be able to give you a heads up. You and I both know that when you alter tax code, it also alters behavior in multiple ways. There are 6 of us, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats that are working together to try to resolve some of the issues on charitable giving. It'll be something that we will come back and have a longer conversation with you about in the future of how we can continue to encourage engagement on charitable giving for the future. So thanks again for the service.
Thank you.
Senator Cortez Masto by remote, if you're available.
I'm here. Thank you, Chairman Grassley, and to the ranking member for convening this important hearing today. Commissioner, thank you for joining us. I do want to associate myself with the comments of Senator Langford. The workers and employees at the IRS, they are truly also heroes in the sense that they are working all the time and trying to get these payments out and doing everything they can in our community. So I, and like my colleagues, support them. Whatever resources you need, please make us aware of it. I know it's a challenging time right now. I do want to address a concern that I'm hearing in my state, but across the country. I talk quite often and have worked in domestic violence prevention area for a good part of my career, and I've worked with our legal aid centers. I am hearing from survivors of domestic violence who have fled their abusers, often with their children, but whose abusers have walked away with their economic impact payment. In other words, the survivors are not getting their EIPs. And in some instances, the IRS is issuing economic impact payments based on jointly filed tax returns, but it's not following accompanying forms 8888 to split the economic impact payments in the same manner that refunds were split. I sent to you, Commissioner, a letter along with Secretary Mnuchin about this a couple of weeks ago. It was joined by 35 of my Senate colleagues. I haven't received a response yet. So since I have you here, I would love to ask you, what is the IRS doing to get replacement checks out to victims of domestic violence who are in desperate need right now because they are not getting their EIPs? and how do we get them those payments and take into consideration their safety and financial stability away from their abusers as well.
I have your letter. Your letter is actually on my desk. The process of getting the response back to you, it is in process. I think your letter had some actually really great suggestions. I think they were listed under a request section near the back of the letter, and things that we're taking under consideration. We take advice from everybody, and we take good advice from everybody as well. The individuals, particularly with respect to domestic violence, who filed an injured spouse claim, I indicated in a response earlier that we are going to process those separately, and so I would like to say that's going to happen in July. If it's going to be later than July, I'll reach back out to you and give you the timeline on that. But I think that every person at the Internal Revenue Service is very sympathetic, understanding, and would like to assist any victim of domestic violence. And, our people care, and they care a lot. And this is a particular type of an arena where we can actually provide significant assistance. And so to have a victim of domestic violence also not be able to receive the payment, particularly at this time of need, does not sit well with us. So it's a priority and a focus for us. And again, I would like to thank you for your letter, and particularly the suggestions in your letter were quite helpful.
Yeah, Commissioner, thank you. And I appreciate that. And those suggestions were put together by many across this country who work to really help and support and get resources to our survivors from domestic violence. So as you look at that list, because it's really common sense, and it's also, I think, not only helpful during this pandemic, but in the future, and how the IRS can work with to support and make sure our survivors of domestic violence are accessing the funds that they're entitled to. So as you look through this, because I know the recommendations are a dedicated phone line, create a process with an online PIN, utilize existing prepaid cards tied to government benefits, on and on and on. There's some great suggestions. If you need resources to implement these suggestions, I would hope that you would also let us know, and so that we can make sure we're giving you the resources so that you can implement these tools to get the money to our survivors from domestic violence. So please know that I'm running out of time, but I will submit the rest of my questions for the record. Again, Commissioner, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've been told that Senator Brown is remote and would be the next one for me to call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Senator Wyden, thank you for this hearing. Commissioner, thanks for your public service. In the midst of a pandemic, our country reckoned with the horrific murders of Mr. Floyd and Ms. Taylor and too many other Black Americans at the hands of police. Communities across this country are calling for justice, reinvestment of resources, and, as you know, an end to systemic racism. Many of us rightly examine the ways racism is baked into almost every facet of public policy. We must do better. One area that hasn't been closely examined, Mr. Chairman, through a lens of racial justice is our tax policy. Over $1 trillion moves through the IRS each year. 150 million households file taxes. The American people deserve to know that taxpayers are treated fairly by our tax laws and by our tax enforcement agencies. Congress writes the tax laws. If there are ways our current tax code exacerbates racial inequity, then it's our job to fix it. And it's your job, Commissioner, to enforce the tax laws we write. So you and Congress, all of us around this table, virtually or in person, are responsible and partners in this. Mr. Commissioner, will you work with Congress and have your staff at the Statistics of Income Division help us determine ways in which our tax code contributes to racial wealth disparities?
Sure. I think you're aware. I'm huge proponent of inclusiveness, diversity, and I think you're possibly aware of the fact that I'm the first commissioner whose spouse came to this country as a refugee. And so I understand how people are treated in different arenas. And we're all in.
That was the answer I figured you would give. Thank you. Research shows that employers often discriminate against job applicants based on their first or last names. The Form 1040, or basic income tax form, asks for first and last names. The IRS is the agency responsible for tax enforcement, and it has access to first and last names as it carries out its enforcement responsibilities. Do you have safeguards in place to ensure that enforcement actions do not target filers based on first or last names?
That's correct, we do.
Does the IRS study racial disparities in its enforcement efforts?
There is no race or geographic issues that come up with respect to audit selection, which is what most people consider to be the enforcement side of the Internal Revenue
Well,
Service.
can you, I understand that. I'm glad to hear that in one sense, but can you assure me and assure the American people that IRS audit rates don't disproportionately, not by intention, but by commission perhaps, that IRS audit rates don't disproportionately hit Black and brown people? Can you assure us that that doesn't
Yes.
happen? Okay. I want to ask you about the tool, and I want to work with you on all that, and thank you for your
Senator,
offer.
I'd like to add, we have a zero tolerance in the Internal Revenue Service for issues of discrimination. And that comes from me, and every employee of the Internal Revenue Service has heard that. And I also like to say that the fact that we have a quite diverse employee base, we are stronger because we come into the room from different doors and we work together and we care about each other and we care about this
Thank
country.
you. As my office does and as my committee staff does, in terms of racial diversity and making us better. There is implicit racism, of course, as you know, in this system, and that's what I'm trying to dig down. There are no accusations certainly against you that way. I want to ask you one other thing about the tool the IRS developed this year to help people who don't normally file a return get their stimulus check. You call it the non-filer tool. 1 in 5 people eligible, as you know, for EITC don't get it. This is a key anti-poverty tool, puts money directly into people's pockets. I know the chairman supports it. I know Senator Wyden supports it. But too many filers leave that money on the table. 80% take up is a place to start, but we can do better. That's why I wrote you earlier this year asking you to act on the recommendations to implement automatic EITC for childless adults. I appreciated your response. You said you couldn't make automatic EITC work even for childless adults because you're still missing information. It seems to me, though, Commissioner, the IRS can repurpose the tool you've already developed, the non-filer tool, and turn it into a Get My EITC tool. Your response to me said there was missing information stopping you from sending an automatic EITC return. You could easily ask for this basic information using the non-filer tool. So my question is, Commissioner, my last question, will IRS use this tool to increase EITC take-up moving forward?
Senator, I think you're going to see a replication of a couple of the tools that came out during this, and you should know that the Get My Payment tool was a replication of the Where's My Refund tool. That allowed us to get these tools up, with one within 10 days, one within 2 weeks. And we are looking at, this is the future of the Internal Revenue Service. And
So
it's part of
you are
modernization.
very open to an EITC automatic tool.
We are looking at that. Yes, sir.
Good. We will work with you, and we really appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, thank you for this hearing.
Thank you, Senator Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Wyden, much appreciated. Mr. Commissioner, these are tough times, and I've worked hard to provide relief to help many struggling Montana families, workers, small businesses who are facing economic hardships as a result of this pandemic. Much of that relief getting to Montana has been through the tax code. So I want to thank you for all that you and your agency have done to facilitate that. And I look forward to continuing to work to provide more relief to Montanans as our economy continues to recover. In the past 3 months, Congress has approved trillions of dollars in relief for the American people. Unfortunately, pushing out huge amounts of money so quickly can present opportunities for criminals to prey on the most vulnerable, who are often our senior citizens. My question is, could you discuss the actions that the IRS has taken to uncover and combat criminal activity targeting our senior citizens and other vulnerable populations?
Senior citizens and vulnerable populations tend to get the terminology used in the field as scams, and it's people either impersonating or I can help you with respect to an EIP payment, pay me a fee, and this and that. Both IRS criminal investigation and folks on the civil side of the Internal Revenue Service, as well as Treasury Inspector General's office, have been extremely aggressive in those arenas. We think we've been quite successful, but you only know that your success is based on the ones that we find, not the ones that we don't find. But there's numerous criminal prosecutions that have been pursued, and we're what we do is we investigate and turn it over to Department of Justice or U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecutions. But we're very active there. And if you look at the data book, you'll see the Internal Revenue Service high degree of focus in the arena, particularly for vulnerable individuals. And that will continue.
It's much appreciated, Mr. Commissioner. I'm going to shift gears and talk about conservation easements, and I want to applaud the work that you and the Internal Revenue Service have done in stepping up enforcement efforts on these abusive, syndicated conservation easements. I also want to applaud Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Wyden for their investigation of these transactions, and I look forward to reviewing the findings of their investigation very soon. Recent decisions by the U.S. Tax Court demonstrate what we have long known, that abusive, syndicated conservation easement deals are costing taxpayers billions and tarnishing the reputation of this very valuable conservation tool. In fact, in one recent case, the court noted that property valued at $30 million had, within 3 days, an easement with a claimed value of $155 million. Honest, charitably motivated actors deserve strong rules to protect against this clear abuse, and taxpayers should not have to foot the bill for profit-motivated tax shelters. And this is why I introduced the Charitable Conservation Easement Program. It's a Charitable Conservation Easement Program Integrity Act with Senator Stabenow, which would help to weed out some of the worst actors in this space by denying the charitable tax deduction when investors claim a tax benefit that is more than 2.5 times their investment. My question is, does the IRS have the time, the personnel, and the resources to prosecute all known abusive syndication cases?
The IRS would welcome legislation with respect to syndicated conservation easements, the abusive transactions. Under this commissioner, the IRS will aggressively go after everybody involved in one of those transactions. I think the people who are in compliance need to know that the folks who take advantage in that manner are at risk, and we intend to maintain a presence in that neighborhood. And I think tax court has gone in our favor, even a 40% penalty. We had 3 cases last week. I think you'll see a number of compliance actions surface over the course of the next month or so.
So given the amount of taxpayer resources being put to use on this, how helpful would it be to have this bill, Senate Bill 170, enacted into law?
It would help us significantly.
Thank you. I want to note my support for modifying and expanding the employee retention tax credit, for which we enacted as part of the CARES Act. This worker-focused design of the credit, coupled with the requirement that a business has to have has experienced significant negative impact to be eligible, makes it a good fit for the targeted type of relief we are looking for to enact in this next package. I hope my colleagues join me in pushing to expand this tax credit as part of the next relief package. My question is, I'm wrapping up here, Mr. Commissioner, from an administrative perspective, how has the advanced refund process using Form 7200 worked so far?
I think that what we're seeing is that the process is working smoothly. There's, I dealt with an issue about having to e-fax, with another senator, having to e-fax it as opposed to maybe can we get an online portal or the ways we can streamline it. But I would say that overall, we think it's working smoothly.
Any idea how long it takes for business claiming the credit to get reimbursed?
About a third of the people who filed 7200s have received it. So on that basis, we're probably talking 6 weeks, give or take, 4 weeks, give or take. I don't really have it. I don't know that we have the study. We'll know more, actually, in terms of the program itself once the second quarter returns are filed, and we should be able to provide some data based on that.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
I think we're to a point where Senator from Oregon has one follow-up question. That'll be the only second round we have. So if there's anybody, there's still a couple people I haven't marked off the list yet. If you want to ask questions after Senator Wyden, you better let me know very soon. Otherwise, we're going to shut down. Senator Wyden.
Do you want to see if there's any people waiting right now before I go, Mr.?
Well, I think there'd only be one if it's Senator Young.
He's not remote. He's not remote. Okay. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will keep this to one question. Commissioner, just a question with respect to small businesses, because My state is overwhelmingly a small business state. These are people that are just walking an economic tightrope right now every single day, and they're maxing out their credit cards and the like. The question really I want to get into is this question of the most efficient way to help them. And I have thought in particular the concept of they're getting a rebate similar to the individual rebates is a constructive idea to look at. You all have been helpful to us. Thank you. Wouldn't it be easier for both the taxpayer and the IRS to rely on previously filed information that the IRS has in its system rather than having these laborious processes that include massive influxes of new tax filings and using fax machines and the like? Wouldn't it be better to use what you already have?
We used what we already had with respect to EIPs, and there was a segment, obviously, of the population that doesn't file tax returns, and so we needed to come up with a different variation of that. I think that one of the ideas with respect to the retention credits was that the funds essentially are already there in the possession of the business owner, and I think you're, as I know you're aware, I come from a small business family, and I have, current members of my family who are involved in small businesses, so very sensitive to the issues. But we're certainly more than willing to work with you and your staff on processes and ideas.
I'll wrap up on this because we have a cleanup in terms of getting some follow-up materials. I think we do want to know, Senator Warner touched on this, what the IRS needs to continue to fight fraud so that taxpayers can get those advance credits electronically instead of by fax. So let's say we'd like that information within a week. And second, as we talked about earlier, I am particularly concerned about millionaires skipping out on paying their taxes. Officials come, and we understand that this didn't happen on your watch, and we can't find out exactly what was done to follow up. Then we hear that there are going to be changes made in the future, and then this cycle just repeats itself again and again and again as the wealthiest taxpayers figure out how to just escape their obligations that those small business people have to comply with. So I'd like answers to the questions I asked earlier with respect to the millionaires skipping out within a week, and then this question that I think we agree on is a serious matter with respect to fraud associated with the advanced credits. I'd like that within a week too. Okay,
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Want to clear up something. I hope I'm not really asking you a question, Commissioner, but if I'm wrong on saying some of these statistics, I want you to correct me. It's in regard to appropriations because we've had some people on the committee claim that the IRS's enforcement efforts are not being funded sufficiently. I think that isn't true. When the administration put out its budget request about 16 months ago for the current fiscal year, it asked for $4.7 billion for IRS enforcement. Last December, Congress funded IRS enforcement by more than what it had asked for. IRS enforcement ended up getting $300 million more for a total of $5 billion. In its latest budget request, the IRS is asking for $5.1 billion, which is a 2% increase from what it's getting this year. Basically, the IRS is asking for an enforcement budget that Congress is giving to it. There is no shortfall in the funding of the IRS enforcement efforts. You don't have to respond to that unless I said something that was wrong. So I'll close with this. First of all, thank you for sitting here for 2.5 hours to answer our questions. I appreciate the hard work you and your agency is doing during this tax season, a very difficult tax season. And we would look forward to having you testify before the committee in the future. I'll close by identifying that any written questions members may have for the record need to be submitted by the close of business on Wednesday, the 14th. With that, we will adjourn.
Thank you very much.